Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a frozen pond, trying to reach something precious that's fallen through a hole in the ice. The more desperately you stretch your arm into the water, the more your muscles tense, and the shorter your reach becomes. The harder you try, the more impossible your goal. Only when you finally exhale, relax your shoulder, and stop trying so hard does your arm extend those crucial extra inches to grasp what you seek. This paradox haunts our existence. We are taught from our first stumbling steps that effort equals reward, that striving leads to success, that the path to mastery is paved with deliberate practice and focused attention. We internalize the equation: want something badly enough plus try hard enough equals achievement. But what if this fundamental calculus of human striving is deeply, tragically flawed? Consider the insomniac, eyes wide at 3 a.m., desperately commanding their mind, "Sleep now!" The more they try to force slumber, the more alert they become. Or the musician who, during the most important performance of their life, suddenly becomes painfully self-conscious of every finger movement, losing the flow that once came naturally. The anxious speaker who, focusing so intently on appearing confident, freezes in awkward self-awareness. This is the great contradiction that ancient Taoists recognized over 2,000 years ago. Our very desire to control, to achieve, to force outcomes often creates the exact obstacle that prevents us from reaching our goal. They called this paradoxical wisdom wu-wei, literally non-doing or non-action, but perhaps better understood as effortless action, or the art of not trying. But wait, how can not trying possibly be the answer in a world that demands constant productivity, optimization, and measurable outcomes? How can we reconcile this ancient wisdom with our modern obsession with hustle culture, growth mindsets, and relentless self-improvement? The contradiction tears at something deep within us. On one hand, we feel the intuitive truth of those moments when things flow naturally, when we're in the zone, acting without overthinking. On the other hand, we fear that embracing not trying means surrendering to laziness, mediocrity, or failure. This tension between effort and effortlessness isn't merely philosophical. It manifests in our cramped shoulders, clenched jaws, and racing hearts. It appears in our relationships when trying too hard to be loved pushes others away. It emerges in our creative pursuits when forcing brilliance yields only sterile, lifeless results. What if our entire approach to achievement, fulfillment, and even happiness has been fundamentally misguided? What if the answer isn't to try harder but to understand a deeper way of being that transcends the exhausting cycle of striving and disappointment? This question strikes at the very foundation of how we navigate our existence. And to answer it, we must first understand the hidden force that keeps us trapped in the cycle of counterproductive effort, a psychological and cultural blind spot that has shaped human behavior for centuries. The hidden force that sabotages our efforts has a name that psychologists and philosophers have circled for centuries: self-consciousness. Not the shyness kind, but the meta-awareness that makes us spectators of our own actions. This splitting of attention, half on the task, half on watching ourselves perform the task, creates what Taoists might call a fracture in our natural being. Consider what happens to your walking when you suddenly become aware of how you walk. The fluid motion deteriorates into mechanical awkwardness. The once automatic process now requires conscious control, and paradoxically, this control undermines the very skill it seeks to perfect. Psychologists call this paralysis by analysis, when expertise collapses under the weight of its own self-monitoring. This destructive self-consciousness emerges from deeper cultural and psychological roots. Western philosophy, from Plato to Descartes, emphasized a split between mind and body, reason and instinct. The rational mind was positioned as the superior controller that should subordinate our animal nature. This created a fundamental mistrust of spontaneity and intuition, the very qualities that Taoism celebrates. Then came the Industrial Revolution, with its mechanical view of humans as productive units. Time became something to spend efficiently. Our worth became measured by output. The clockwork universe demanded clockwork humans. We internalized this mechanistic view, seeing ourselves as machines that could be optimized, tuned, and pushed for maximum productivity. Rest became merely a means to better work later, not a natural state in itself. Modern capitalism intensified this by commodifying every aspect of our being. Even our leisure must be productive. We work out, we engage in self-improvement, we build relationships. Our inner life becomes another resource to extract value from. The market economy, brilliant at creating external wealth, colonized our interior landscape with the same relentless demand. Produce more, achieve more, be more. This creates what philosopher Alan Watts called the backwards law. The more we pursue positive experiences directly, the more they elude us. Happiness pursued becomes self-conscious happiness, which isn't happiness at all. Confidence sought directly transforms into anxiety about not appearing confident enough. The very structure of trying contains the seed of its own defeat. Social media has catastrophically amplified this self-consciousness. We now live in perpetual awareness of ourselves as performers on life stage, mentally framing our experiences for potential sharing even as we live them. We become divided, half experiencing, half curating those experiences for others' consumption. This division is the antithesis of Taoist wholeness. Even our approach to mindfulness and meditation often becomes another arena for achievement and measurement. We track our meditation streaks, quantify our calm, and subtly compete for spiritual progress. The ego co-opts even the practices designed to transcend it. The psychological cost is staggering. Anxiety disorders, burnout, and depression have reached epidemic proportions. The World Health Organization names stress as the health epidemic of the 21st century. Despite unprecedented material prosperity, we report lower life satisfaction than previous generations. We have gained the world but lost the way. What makes this trap so insidious is that the standard solution, try harder to relax, work more diligently at being spontaneous, put more effort into effortlessness, only tightens the knot. Like the Chinese finger trap that constricts when pulled against, our conventional problem-solving approach strengthens the very problem it attempts to solve. The roots run deeper still into our neurological wiring. The human prefrontal cortex, evolved for planning and control, constantly overrides the older, wiser systems that operate below conscious awareness. We trust explicit knowledge over implicit understanding, despite overwhelming evidence that our unconscious mind processes information far more efficiently for many tasks. This supremacy of conscious control is not just culturally constructed, it's built into our evolutionary hardware. Yet there exists another way of being, one that ancient Taoists discovered through careful observation of nature and human experience. A path that doesn't require adding more effort, but rather removing the obstacles to our natural flow. The Taoist solution begins not with adding something new, but with removing the artificial barriers we've constructed between ourselves and our natural state. Wu-wei, the art of not trying, isn't about passivity or laziness. It's about aligning with what the Taoists called the way, the natural unfolding of life itself. Picture a river flowing around rocks. It doesn't strain or struggle. It simply follows the path of least resistance. Yet in its seeming effortlessness, it carves canyons and shapes mountains over time. This is the paradoxical power that Lao Tzu described when he wrote, "The softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest." The first step toward wu-wei requires a radical surrender, not of effort entirely, but of our attachment to controlling outcomes. Consider how children learn. A toddler doesn't approach walking with a strategic 12-week improvement plan. They fall, rise, fall again, laugh, cry, and suddenly one day they walk. Their learning happens through playful engagement with reality, not through forced effort. This natural learning process continues to be available to us as adults, though we've buried it under layers of self-consciousness. The master calligrapher doesn't achieve perfect brushstrokes by tensing their muscles and overthinking each movement. Rather, after years of practice, they learn to get out of their own way, allowing something deeper than conscious control to express itself through them. This reveals the true relationship between discipline and effortlessness. The paradox resolves when we understand that practice and training aren't about forcing mastery, but about creating the conditions where mastery can naturally emerge. The violinist practices scales not to control the music, but to train their nervous system until it can express music without interference from the controlling mind. Practically speaking, this means approaching challenges with what Zen practitioners call beginner's mind, a state of openness uncluttered by expectations. When faced with difficulty, instead of tensing and trying harder, experiment with relaxing and allowing your innate intelligence to respond. Notice how often the solution appears precisely when you stop searching so desperately for it. In conversation, observe how your most authentic connections happen when you're not trying to impress or perform. In creative work, recognize how your best ideas emerge not when you're straining to be brilliant, but when you're relaxed, playful, or even slightly distracted. These aren't coincidences. They're glimpses of your natural capacity operating without interference. This approach transforms our relationship with failure. When we're not identified with the controlling ego, failure becomes information rather than threat. The Taoist sage welcomes failure as simply another face of reality, neither good nor bad, just what is. This acceptance doesn't diminish results. Paradoxically, it improves them by removing the fear and tension that inhibit performance. Consider the martial artist who learns to use an opponent's force rather than opposing it directly. Or the surfer who succeeds not by conquering the wave, but by becoming one with its motion. This is wu-wei in action, accomplishment through alignment rather than opposition. Modern neuroscience confirms what Taoists intuited millennia ago. When we enter flow states, those periods of effortless absorption in activity, the brain's default mode network, associated with self-referential thinking, becomes less active. In other words, when the self-monitoring mind steps back, our natural capabilities step forward. We perform best when we get out of our own way. This doesn't mean abandoning goals or ambitions. Rather, it means holding them lightly, focusing more on process than outcome, and trusting that the natural intelligence that grows trees and spins galaxies is also at work within you. The Taoist approach isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing without forcing, striving without straining, achieving without exhausting yourself in the process. Imagine approaching your life's challenges like water, flowing around obstacles rather than struggling against them, powerful in your flexibility, patient in your persistence. Imagine trusting that beneath your planning mind lies a deeper wisdom that, if allowed to emerge, can guide you more effectively than your anxious calculations ever could. The great revelation of Taoism isn't that effort is unnecessary, but that the right kind of effort has a quality of effortlessness. Like the difference between swimming upstream and swimming with the current. Both involve movement, but one exhausts while the other exhilarates. Next time you find yourself straining against reality, pause. Take a breath. Feel the tension in your body. Then ask yourself, what would happen if, just for this moment, I stopped trying so hard? What natural response might emerge if I trusted myself enough to let go? The art of not trying isn't about doing less. It's about being more. More present, more aligned, more in harmony with your own nature and the nature of reality itself. And in that alignment, you may discover what Taoists have always known, that your most effective action emerges not from forcing life to bend to your will, but from the wisdom to bend like the reed in the wind. Yielding yet unbroken, flexible yet strong, effortless yet unstoppable.